So it was 3 weeks ago. I sat down next to Paula Fulkerson at the women's lunch, and she started talking about Evan Osno's new book called The Haves and Have-Yachts. Jim had read it and been, I think, sharing it with some of you, and the book is basically about just the incredible rising social inequity of the world and the billionaire class, I guess now trillionaire class, and just kind of the really ostentatious way that people with extravagant sums of money have their mega yachts and show off. It made me think of Betsy DeVos. Remember 2017 when she was Trump's Secretary of Education, even though she had no background in education, and someone had untied her yacht on Lake Erie. I remember being so happy that my son, who was a college sailor, was up in Boston and not with his friends at Lake Erie. But anyway, there was like minimal damage done to the $40 million yacht, like $10,000. But when the family was contacted, their response was, which yacht? Because she had 10, right? So it's some stories said 22, but she had some yachts. So this story, Evan Osnos, is sort of similar. It's about like how the super rich compete with one another and have these elaborate parties and, huge celebrations with all their friends and just want to outdo one another so that they have like 15 to 20 servants per guest on the yacht, right? It's just so over the top. That's Luke's gospel. Luke's gospel is big and bold, and it's the burlesque. Luke's gospel he has this way of doing it. Like, you all are so amazing and so incredible and so beautiful that if you wander off, I'm going to leave the 99 sheep, I'm going to come find you, right? The grace in Luke's gospel is just over the top. But so is the greed. And so in this passage, you have this rich man. He's got a lot, but he's going to go to a distant country to get royal power for himself because he doesn't have enough. So he heads off, but before he does, he brings his 10 slaves together, and he gives them each a pound, and he tells them, hey, I want you to do business with this. Now, just real quick, slavery was a real thing in the first century. These people might have been more like servants or retainers or kind of overseers. They're no doubt under this guy's thumb, but they can also kind of benefit from the system too. So the man sets off, and then the citizens of the country, this is the first No Kings rally, they send a delegation after him and say, we do not want this guy to rule over us, right? No, that's not what we want. But then the king comes back, the rich man comes back, and he says to the slaves, hey, how'd you do with your trading? The first one says, I took 1 pound, I made 10, 1,000% profit here. Here's your 10 cities being charged. The second one says, took your pound, made 500% profit, be in charge of 5 cities. The third one, who is actually the hero, at least in Luke's version, and certainly in this Gospel of Nazarenes that, is a non-canonical gospel, this third one actually calls the rich guy out. And he would have been, like everybody else, would have been over there, the bystanders applauding him, because, again, they lived in a world where you can't make that kind of crazy return without exploiting someone, right? Without having a whole lot of little kids in some mine in Africa pulling out the minerals to make your phone. That's how these people get crazy rich. So the third one says to the man, he calls him out. He says, I was afraid because you're a harsh man. And so I took it and I wrapped it in a cloth because I know that you take what you haven't deposited, you reap what you haven't sown. And the rich man, he doesn't say, I'm not a harsh man, I'm not an unethical man. He says, hey, I'm going to use your words, you lazy slave. You said to me, you know that I take what I don't deposit and reap what I don't sow. Why didn't you at least take the treasurer, take the pound, and put it in the bank and earn interest so I would have that when I come back? Now, of course, interest was completely unethical and disallowed in the Torah, right? This guy does not care. He is above the law, right? That's the point. And so then, he says, hey, take this guy, take away his pound and give it to the other one with 10. And everybody says, that ain't right. He's already got 10. And then, because the rich man does not care and he's harsh, he says, take all the citizens who did not want me to rule over them and slay them in my presence. Now, you can't pass this parable up because I hate to bring it up, but this is exactly what scholars of history and political science are saying. like we're headed towards, right? It's like this week, it's not just an authoritarian ethno-nationalist state, but it's what scholars call the political system that is now taking sway is called a patrimonial system, right? It's a godfather system. It's a system where the person in power puts other people in power, not because they have skill, not because they have expertise, not because they have a mission or a passion, like Pete Hegseth, but because of corruption and kin and connection. And then you put those people in place, and then how do you rule? You rule with rewards and punishments, right? So that if this blue state did not support me, then I'm not going to do what? Release disaster funds. This is a very dangerous moment, right? It's a very dangerous system. And this is exactly what is going on in the scripture, like verbatim. But that's not the only thing going on, right? Because what else is going on? You got the citizens out there, the 8.5 million people who have poured out in the streets saying, we're not going to do this. And then you get this other guy who is, let's just say, a Mamdani character, this third guy. He's going to come out, and he's not only going to call out the system and say, I don't think so. No. He's also going to, in a way, take some of the steam out of it by divesting. See, he takes that pound that the guy was using to exploit, and he pulls it out. He's like, I'm not investing in that. And in some ways, I keep thinking about, the speech that Mamdani made on Tuesday night, where he did what? Named exploitation, named the slumlords, named the corruption, and then what did he do? Call out the president, right? I mean, it was just right out there. And what's significant about that, and why it's helpful for us to hold on to, is that the first step in change is always what? Calling it out, naming it, right? Exodus 3, the people were enslaved. What did they do? They cried out. So it's like saying, this ain't right. This has to be different. And it is true in our own lives too. Absolutely true in our own lives too. You're right? If something is off kilter, COVID happened, and then you just quit leaving your home, which is still a lot of people, too isolated, you got to name that, right? You got to say, I have closed off. I have pulled in too much. Or maybe you're just off balance right now, right? We got enough Halloween candy for the whole city, and we only had 7 trick-or-treaters. So now we're, there's a lot of candy in the house, right? So sometimes you have to just call that out, say it's your addictive patterns, it's this, it's that. And you know what's important about stating it? To saying, I'm really trying to be more invested. I'm really trying to eat healthier. I'm really trying to give myself more to other people, because then your friends hear you, the people around you hear you, they hold you accountable, and they encourage you, right? So that's a huge step that's going on here. That's the first step in any prophetic change or any personal change, is saying what's not right. What's the second step? The second step, which is harder, imagining something different, right? Because what's the answer? There's more conflict, we're going to have more bombs. There's more weapons, we're going to have more wars. But to imagine something different, imagine a world where the lion and the lamb lie down together. Imagine a world where there's enough food for every little kid, where we share it. Imagine, to try to imagine. Our world is all about implement. But to imagine, to try to dream something different, which is, to be honest, the people who prevailed Tuesday night, they put out an image of something different. To get to any of us, you're going to have to come through all of us. They offered this image of community and solidarity and a world of affordability where there's enough housing and food and all this stuff laid out. And that's true in our own lives too. You've got to be able to say, what is it that you want for yourself? When you wake up in the morning, what is the dream you have? Your relationships, care and intimacy and love and growth, your own health. It's like saying it, so you've got to be able to dream it, which is in many ways kind of the other part of Luke's gospel, right? The other part of Luke's message, because he's got this first volume where he's kind of back and forth about how things should be, and then he's got the book of Acts, right? And remember how the book of Acts, Luke's second volume, starts off, the first 4 chapters. It's what kind of a community are we going to have? We're going to have the Spirit-infused world where we're all living out our vision, and guess what? Acts 2 and 4, there's not a needy person among them, right? Because everyone shares everything they have in common. And if there's someone hungry, then we sell our house and take the proceeds and lay it at the foot of the apostles. Let me tell you, we're concerned about the hunger situation, but Joe and I do not have our house up for sale, right? I mean, so there's this kind of, the scholars are all like, did this ever really happen? This kind of utopian community that Luke describes. Some scholars say that's why Christianity grew so fast, was because, the Roman Empire was such a horrible place, and the Christians took in the poor and the widows, and so it grew. And other people say, well, it also had to do with the fact that Christianity became the religion of the empire, and it's easier to convert people when you've got a crusade going, right? And when you're like coming at them with a knife, right? But in that whole challenge, there's also this other voice that keeps coming to me right now, which is the voice of Dr. King, which is a voice about how really difficult change is. Some of you know his book, his last book, a year before he was assassinated, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? He wrote this book in 1967. He had gone to Jamaica by himself. Well, Coretta was there and a couple of people, but he kind of isolated himself. He was obviously still a young man of 38. It was a few years after the civil rights historic legislation of 64 and 65, and there was, right, this sense of euphoria that we're going to turn it around, that we're going to be able to go in a new, fresh direction. And then, there were the Watts riots. Then there were, unrest in Chicago, Vietnam, and just the realization of how hard and difficult change was going to be. And so King is writing this book. He himself has lived in the Chicago slums for, several weeks on end, trying to understand. And what he says in the book largely is, while getting white people to stop lynching and to give up segregated pools and segregated schools has been a lot harder than it should be, what's coming next is going to be a lot harder. Because what's coming next is imagining a world of enough. Imagining a world where we go, 3 centuries of slavery is a lot. And what does a real America look like of equal opportunity? And what does it look like to kind of try to realize we're going to have to reshuffle things and look at what does it mean to have affordable housing and all this? And part of, I think, what King is saying in here to me is, how do you get to enough quicker? How do you get to a place where you have enough, you're not so anxious, and so you can share more generously? And as we kind of close in on Luke, that's probably my favorite part of Luke's gospel, is that story of the temptation. Remember how Jesus is hungry, 40 days without anything to eat. And in Luke's version, it's not so much a temptation as it is an invitation. It's like the devil comes to him and says, hey, aren't you hungry? Wouldn't you like to have a sandwich? And why don't you just take all these kingdoms? And how about throw yourself off that building and see if the angels will catch you? And instead, Jesus says, no, I'm good. I'm okay. I got enough. What have I got? I'm good, right? It's like, how do you get to enough quicker? I mean, I think that's part of what's going on here, is it's not just super rich and the super poor. It's like all of us, like how do we get to enough quicker with other people too? I was thinking about walking this week with one of our very sharp, wonderful, beautiful young moms, and we're talking about family and parents, and she was talking about the journey of kind of getting to a place of acceptance, right? And kind of going, you know what my parents were able to offer, it was enough. It was okay. Wasn't everything, right? But how do we get to enough quicker with that? I don't mean like, oh, it's okay that a person's abusive. I mean, like, how do we look at one another and also say, this is who you are. This is what you can offer. And how do we get to enough quicker with ourselves, right? Like, what we can offer and our own shortcomings. This is who we are. So I think what King and Mamdani and Luke are actually inviting us to is finally joy. It's finally like enter into the Master's joy. It's understand what gift there can be from just living simply in community. Not so much dominating or controlling, but kind of offering yourself in a free way. So it was the morning after the women's lunch. I went to Cherith Brook on Tuesday morning and pulled up. It was 8 a.m. and there's always like a long line of people already there to get something to eat, to get a shower. And some people have been there 6 a.m. so that they can get the shower. Other people can eat too. And I walked in, and Jerry was there, of course, because Jerry's almost always there if he's in town. And he was getting ready to serve, and then he was going to do all kinds of building projects, but I could tell he looked worried, and there was something wrong. And the something wrong was there had been a big plumbing issue, and the basement had flooded. It was a huge mess, and it also meant that there would be no showers, right? And it would be really difficult to serve people because we couldn't wash dishes and and provide water. But there was this weird thing, which was like, for some odd reason, there were twice as many volunteers as I have ever seen there. I mean, the place was just packed. You know, we were gathered together to have our little reflection and meditation time before we began serving. And I thought again about the ratio of 15 to 20 servants to 1, right? And I was thinking, what a beautiful place, right? All of these people who have come just to share, just to love, just to care, just to give. And I'd take that any day. I mean, it was the most beautiful yacht you've ever seen, right? Everybody was coming in there for the same reason, because all of us are broken, needy, needing grace, needing care, needing love, needing joy. So in this time when things are as cattywampus, right, as we can recall or have ever lived, may we think about in our own sweet lives what it means to just open ourselves to this gift of the big, bold grace of love that God offers, and what it means to extend those to all we meet. Amen.